What is your name, age, and where do you live?
My name is Kari Dahl. I am 35 years old and I live in Sammamish, Washington.
Tell me about your diagnosis story.
I suffered from panic attacks, or what I thought were panic attacks, for 7 years and took a variety of drugs for those, including like sedatives and a daily antidepressant and anti-anxiety medication. And then in January of 2015, we tried to get pregnant for the second time. And we found out a week after we thought we were pregnant, and then a week later found out that it was an ectopic pregnancy. And the technician at the ultrasound clinic noticed that I had a tumor on my right adrenal gland. And in addition to having an ectopic pregnancy. So the first thing they had to do was treat the ectopic pregnancy with a methotrexate injection. And then they told me to follow up on the adrenal tumor, or mass they were calling it. And I didn't know it at the time, but I had bilateral adrenal tumors. One was like 10.5 centimeters in diameter, and the other I think was 3 or 4 centimeters in diameter, on both sides. And so my general practitioner, who I saw after the ectopic was taken care of, suggested that we biopsy the tumor to determine whether it was cancer or not. And I started Googling adrenal tumors because I wanted to know what the possible outcomes were from the biopsy. And one of the things that I noticed when I Googled was a type of tumor called a pheochromocytoma, which is a rare adrenal tumor that secretes different types of cortisol and medinephrines, adrenaline, plasma, or different kinds of hormones that can mimic an adrenaline rush, or which is very similar to a panic attack. And I came into my general practitioner's office and said, I had a printout with the symptoms, and I said, is it possible that this is what I have? And she completely shut me down and said, no, I treat people with anxiety all the time. This is way too rare for this to be what it is. But my symptoms fit completely. I was getting not the classic symptoms of chronic high blood pressure, but I was having episodic high blood pressure, which I didn't know until a little later when I started monitoring it at home on my own, just to see if maybe that was what it was. About a week later, I called an endocrinologist to get a second opinion, and she asked me to come in. And in the appointment, she asked me if I had episodes like that, and I explained that I got headaches, very intense headaches. I would sweat, I would get really nauseated, and often have diarrhea. And she ran a 24-hour urinary catecholamine collection and a plasma medinephrine check, and they were through the roof. And so we didn't have the biopsy, thank God. And when she diagnosed me with Pheo's, she also decided to check my thyroid for medullary thyroid cancer, because pheochromocytoma, especially bilateral Pheo's, is often part of the genetic mutation for multiple endocrine neoplasia type 2A. And unfortunately, my calcitonin was pretty high, as was my CEA serum, which indicated a diagnosis of MEN2A, but I then had to go through genetic testing to determine that. And then I was put on an alpha blocker immediately, but they couldn't do the surgery for this was late February by the time we got the diagnosis of Pheo's. And I was on the alpha blocker until April 30th, when I could have the surgery done at UW Medical Center. Thank heavens that endocrinologist was willing to run the test, because my general practitioner wouldn't have done it otherwise.
What happened after the diagnosis?
We did genetic testing on my entire family, and everyone was negative. Unfortunately, my 3-year-old son, who I'd had prior to all of this happening, was positive, and so we had his thyroid removed prophylactically.
And then you had surgery?
Yes, I had surgery on April 30th to remove both adrenal glands and the tumors. They were big enough that there was no saving the adrenals. And at that point, we knew that the Pheos would just grow back on any adrenal tissue that was left behind. So I had a bilateral adrenalectomy was an open procedure. They were supposed to give me a huge dose of hydrocortisone right after removing my adrenals, and somewhere along the line, one of the med students or someone forgot to do it, and I woke up with a massive headache and I felt awful. And it took a long time for the hydrocortisone to then kick in, so I was pretty sick for a while. Right after the surgery, I was in the ICU for I think a night before they put me in a regular hospital room.
And then you had a second surgery.
And then I had a
after that.
second surgery to remove my thyroid in June, and it was positive for medullary thyroid cancer.
What has your life been like post-surgery?
It's been frustrating. I'm really happy that I don't have the Pheos. I have felt a sense of peace and calmness that I had forgotten what it felt like, I think. But it is frustrating to live with adrenal insufficiency. I think it's a condition that there's not a lot of awareness about it. And it's frustrating and it makes me afraid that people don't know what to do if I should get sick. I really wish there was more awareness, especially amongst the emergency medical technicians, so that I would feel a little bit safer about, ambulances don't carry Cortef, and sometimes ERs make you wait for treatment because they don't understand it and they don't know what you need. That can be a little bit scary, but I'm doing pretty well. I'm taking 20 milligrams of hydrocortisone daily and 0.1 milligrams of fludrocortisone, and I do pretty well on that most days. So it's been a big learning curve, but I'm happy to be Pheo free.
What have you learned about yourself and life throughout this process?
That life is very short and that you have to appreciate it. Why did you ask that question? It wasn't on the list. And that it's a gift, and that you also have to stand up for yourself. If you feel in your heart that something is wrong with you and they're telling you that you're just anxious, or they're telling you that they don't believe you, that you need to push and advocate for yourself because you know your body better than anyone else. That's it.
I love you.
Love you too.